Hello and welcome to After Effects Tech Desk. In this video, we're going to do a tour of the interface of After Effects for new users who are just getting comfortable in the program. There's a whole lot of these windows that are available and it can be pretty overwhelming, so here are the ones that you really just need to know. The first thing to know is that there are different workspaces, and you might see those up here in this bar on top. Or if you go to a window, and all the way at the top is Workspace. And so you can see there's a whole bunch of different workspaces, and that will change the layout of these windows. The main windows to know about are the project window. This is the window that holds all of your assets that you import, whether that's images, text, video, vector files, audio files. All of that gets housed in here, and you can use folders inside of this window to help organize. These folders can be nested, and you can rename these folders by selecting and just hitting enter. This window is also where compositions will go when you create them. Compositions are kind of the main canvas inside of After Effects. You create a new composition and it brings up a dialog box with all these different settings for width, height, and duration, as well as some other items. When you create that, that comes up in this project window, and that can be organized into your files. There are two windows associated with this composition. There's the composition viewer, and there's also the composition timeline. If you're not seeing any of these, if you go back to the window menu, you can find that in here. So timeline is down here, composition, and if for some reason your project folder was closed, that's where you'd find that also. We talked about workspaces. If you click and drag any of these, you can customize the layout of these. So if you wanted this project window to take up more space and the timeline to take up less space, click and hold highlights of where you can move that window to. So if we move that here, now this is over in this space. And we can drag and move that whole column shorter or wider. And if we wanted to do that back, we can click and drag. And you'll see where the highlight of where that can be moved to. Alternatively, you can also click the three little lines next to the tab name, go to Undock Panel, and that will make this into a floating panel that will sit on top. And if you want to move that, you can dock things inside of there, or you can move it back into your main layout. So we have the project window, the composition window, the timeline. The timeline is where you would create layers and animate them, bring them in and out over time. And then the composition window is where you would see that. So if we go up to new layer and create a new layer inside of this composition, you'll see that we have a layer with different attributes that can be adjusted. Now, as you can see, if you double click this, it will go into this layer viewer, which is where you can see the individual layer. I don't use this viewer very often. You see if I import footage from a previous screen recording and double click that, that will open up in the footage window here. And then I can scrub through that to see the raw footage of that. Over here, you can see the effects palette, which is this one right here, effects and presets. This is basically the same thing as navigating to this window and going through these menus. So you can see they are the same thing. And you can come in here to apply effects in that way. The nice thing about using this menu is that you can search. So let's say we want to search for a blur and you know which one it is. You can look that up very quickly. You can also look through animation presets in here, which there are many built in if you've never explored those. The next most important one is the render queue, and this is what the window that is going to be used to export videos. So let's say you had your composition and you brought your video in. And now it's time to export that. You go up to the composition menu, then go down to add to render queue. And you'll see the name of the composition here and here. And this gives you the different settings that you can set. This gives you the different options that you can set while exporting. You can choose what your file format is, quality, and a whole bunch of things. From there, you can hit render, or you can choose to use Q in AME, which is Adobe Media Encoder. And that is just a standalone program that is used just to export videos. It works with Adobe Premiere and After Effects, and it has some advantages and some disadvantages. It's totally fine just to export straight from the render queue here. Some other menus that you might see up here include the info palette, and this gives you some information about what the cursor is seeing. So you can see the colors as I hover over them, and it'll give you the RGB and alpha value there. You can also see the XY value, which can be helpful in some cases. There's an audio monitor palette. The preview palette is also a very important one to know about. The preview palette. And what this gives you is a way to play back your animations inside After Effects, which is just a preview, not exporting them through the render queue, but just looking at them inside the program before you export. You can see these windows are self-collapsing here. You can change the settings on them, or if you're using that preview, you can drag it out and nest it over here in your layout. So the preview window gives you some different options on how to play back your animation or your composition. And it also gives you a way to map different settings to different shortcuts. So traditionally, the number pad 0 is used to RAM preview, but you can see that now you can have one setting for 0. Maybe you want to use spacebar or shift spacebar to have a different setting. Here are some of those. You can change the work area, or you can go to the work area extended, or you can just ignore the work area and just play the entire duration. You can also choose to start from the beginning of your work range or just where your current time marker is. Here's one that's really helpful as you're trying to preview some of the more taxing, some of the techniques that might be slowing down your computer. This is the skip frames. So if you select one of these, that means when you play this back, it's only going to play every fifth frame. You can see it's kind of jumping through. You can see that it's kind of just jumping along. Whereas if I was to set that to 0, it's playing much all of the frames. You can also set a resolution. So auto would mean that it's going to follow whatever you select here inside of the composition menu. Composition menu has these settings down here where you can set your resolution. Look at it at quarter resolution. You can also choose your zoom level and move inside of here with it. You can fit up to 100. You can go beyond that. And if you hit middle mouse button or space bar, hold that down, you can pan within that. Something else in the composition window is if you hit Control R, you can view rulers, and you can look at that, set that also through the view menu. This is also where you can set guides, and just like other programs, and just like other Adobe programs, you can click and drag those out to create guides. And if you want to hide those guides, you can unclick show them. So it won't say hide, it's just a check mark next to show guides. You can also choose to have your items snap to guides there, or lock them and clear them. And there's also settings for grid, just like and there is also an option to show a grid. So we ended up over here because so if the preview is matching resolution over here, if preview is set to auto, it will play this back in whatever resolution it's set to. But you can override that and say when you want to play it back, it'll play it in full resolution. And you could see how this might be helpful. You might set one to low resolution. You might set one to full resolution. You might set one to skip no frames, one to skip a bunch of frames. And if that's helpful, because sometimes you're trying to preview a long range of things, and sometimes you're trying to look at close details and you can look at just a short range. And your computer has a limited amount of range of frames that it can load into its RAM. That's what they call this RAM preview, because it's loading all these frames into your computer's memory. So you have a limited amount, and you can choose to spread out those frames over time, using the skip function or gain more by lowering the resolution. Some other things that you may see over here are the properties palette, and this is kind of a new addition in a few recent uh, After Effects releases, but it kind of summarizes what's on your layer for you. So this has transform effects. If we were to add some text, you can see that it would also put the text settings in there, which another way to set the text settings would be to go to the character palette, which was not visible in this layout before, but that is another one that is something you will use often. And the character palette is much like other Adobe palette character palettes with font selection, style, fill, color, stroke color. If you have a stroke color selected, you then get stroke width and how you want that stroke to interact with the fills. You have text stretch abilities, baseline shift, as well as fake bold and italic. You can also set all caps here, which is a very helpful thing. All that means this font is all text already, all caps already, so it won't show. Change that to something bold. Uh, Zoom in here. Turn up the resolution. And what this does is make your text all caps, even if it's typed in lowercase. If we go through this window, you can see some of these are plugins that I have installed. So AE Juice Pack is something that's available. Essential Graphics is an Adobe thing that tries to help you out with some visuals. I don't use that much. We talked about content aware fill would be something related to AI tools. I haven't used those much lately. Brushes is related to other paths. I really don't use those very much either. But if you are doing certain techniques, that would come in helpful. Info we talked about. Learn is a new tab if you want to you get some official training from After Effects. Lumetri Scopes is related to color correction of footage. So it gives you a way to look at the color balance of your image, and not necessary at all for beginners. But if you're getting into any kind of film color grading, you may want to learn that. Mask interpolation, not necessarily. Maxon stuff is related to 3D program, Maxon Cinema 4D. Media browser gives you ability to look at your drive contents and import items without going into your Finder window or Windows Explorer, however else you're looking for files. This sometimes can be faster or slower, can be hit or miss. Metadata, I don't use much. Motion sketch is kind of a little bit more of an intermediate technique. Paint goes along with the brushes. Paragraph goes along with the character palette. It gives you the ability to left align, center, or right align text. Preview we talked about. Progress, not something I use, but probably gives you a way to monitor your system performance. Review with Frame.io. Frame.io is a platform where you can upload videos for clients to get feedback. They can put in notes, and it's owned by Adobe. And so this just gives you a way to interact with that platform directly from the program rather than having to go through a website interface. Smoother is something that's kind of not necessary for the beginner, although it might be helpful. What it will do is take your animation and smooth it out a little bit. If you've made it a little bit rough, it'll help you work with it. It really kind of goes hand in hand with this motion sketch, which is sort of a screen recording way to animate. So you start a capture and then you move around your object and it will set keyframes based on what it captured. And then so if you found that to be a little bit rough, you would then go in and use the smoother window. The wiggler is kind of along the same lines. After you've set an animation, if you want it to be a little bit more random, which can help with which can help your animations feel more natural sometimes. This is a tool that can go in and add some randomness to your existing keyframes. Then through here we have composition. Effect controls is if you were to apply one of these effects, then it would come up in your layer palette and you could see those items down here, but you could also see all of these options and set them in the effects control palette, which is a lot easier because some of these effects do have quite a few options and can get really deep. The flowchart is an interesting way of looking at compositions and the way that they're linked together. It's not really something that any kind of beginner needs to use and not something I almost ever use. Some users, if you're coming from a film compositing program like Nuke, use more of a flowchart system and might be more familiar if that's something you're used to. Footage window is something we talked about. The layer window we talked about. Project window, render queue, and timeline we all talked about. Below here you can find some other sort of presets and scripts that you can install. Some of these come installed already. The AE Juice are things that I installed, but some of these come with After Effects, like Create Nulls from Paths and VR Comp Editor. Create Nulls from Paths is very handy. It gives you a way to run a process kind of like the motion script and smoother. After you have something created, you can run this process and it will create objects that align with that. All right, that is pretty much it. I hope you found this helpful. If you did, please subscribe to the channel, as there's a whole library of other tips and tricks in After Effects. And if you can't find an answer to the question you're looking for, please leave a comment and I'll try to help you get that answered. All right, thanks for watching.